Yeah, we're back. We're live now. So yes. So Abhijit, please carry on.
Okay, so I'll just start again. Uh, Look, there have been two. One is the farmers' version of events, which started getting reported since last evening, and then there has been the version that has come out from the BJP folks. Okay, now what the farmer says, this jeep came out of nowhere, it mowed us down, and then some of us got so irritated because our colleagues had been killed. We got together, beat up, and killed three BJP guys and one their driver. Right now, the BJP has a different version of things. They say that uh, uh, this was a mob. The moment they saw us going around in BJP flags and things like that, they attacked us. They overturned our this thing and started coming to beat us and things like that. So,
Hmm.
some of us just had to run away, and in the process, somebody might have gotten killed. Now, here's the thing: if a car comes and mows into you, where the rest of the entire thing there is visual evidence for,
Yeah.
which is the farmers torturing and killing, interrogating, torturing, and killing the BJP workers. I've actually tweeted the video of the driver
Hmm.
being beaten. He is badly wounded. He is told to say that this minister, something Teni or whatever, uh,
Mitra.
uh, yeah, sent you to ram your car into us. Okay. And he, even though he knows he is going to die, he says
Hmm.
no, and then they beat him to death. You look, and there is a video of another guy who's lying somewhat alive on one side of the
Road.
road in a field. You can
Hmm.
see that these farmers have gone there, cracked his skull open with a cane.
Hmm.
Right now, my issue with all these so-called reputed news channels or whatever and news websites is
Hmm.
they were all reporting the mowing down as fact without a single shred of video evidence. Not one, especially NDTV,
Hmm.
so-called gold standard of journalism. Not one of these people has bothered reporting of what the farmers did to those people.
Yeah.
This is what has happened so far.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, our beloved Prime Minister, who tweets about everything under the sun, from the Japanese Prime Minister to within 2 hours of Shabana Azmi breaking her nose about her
Hmm.
nose, has no time for his own party people killed, just like all those hundreds of BJP workers who were killed and their wives raped in Bengal, who he did not have time to tweet for. This has been development number two. This is uncontested. Development number three is the fact that some BJP clowns,
Hmm.
despite four of their compatriots being killed, tortured, and killed,
Hmm.
they think it is hilarious that Priyanka Gandhi is just sweeping a floor.
Yeah.
Okay. Then, apparently, it's the murder of democracy that Priyanka Gandhi is not allowed to go anywhere and she is detained and arrested.
Hmm.
That Dipinder Hooda is also arrested. That Chief Minister Channi and Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel are not allowed to land. And some lady called Anita Joshua, who is the correspondent of some newspaper called the Tatigraph, says that, oh, this is, they allowed Modi to go to the 2611 Taj Hotel for photo ops. Now, remember, there the Maharashtra government was on the back foot because the moment the siege of the Taj ended, Vilas
Hmm.
Rao Deshmukh took his Bollywoodia son and that
Yeah.
film director Ram Gopal Verma to do some scavenging for movies out there. At that point, they couldn't stop anybody. But in 2011, when the late Arun Jaitley ji and when the late Sushma Swaraj ji went to Kashmir to hoist the Tiranga out there, they were promptly arrested, not allowed to get out of the airport, put back on a plane, and sent back. That wasn't the murder of democracy for them. So there is a whole string of events. The sheer
Hmm.
callousness of the BJP, the sheer callousness of the Prime Minister, the absolutely disgusting, pathetic journalism, of papers like the Indian Express and NDTV and Co, newspaper of record, TV channel of record, who don't want to give you a story even though there is visual evidence of it, but they will give you another story of which there is absolutely no visual evidence. And then there is, Yogi Adityanath, who has announced 45 lakh rupee compensation to everybody killed, both murderer and victim. So next, I suppose, it's going to be equal compensation both for the victim of a rape and the perpetrator of a rape, etc., etc. And then we come to the larger question. Why is Modi so incompetent at dealing with internal security situations? If you remember, right, ever since that Selampur nonsense started off in November 2019, I was saying control it now or it's going to flare up into something else. It flared up into the Jamia Millia Islamia riots, which then got controlled. The police got sent in to beat up those rioting buggers. And then they created some sham called Shaheen Bagh sit-in protest, which was again blocking roads, violating the fundamental rights of citizens. And I went on saying, break it down then, break it down then. If this keeps continuing, it is only going to go towards violence. They did not break it when they took Gunja Kapoor hostage and beat her up. It did not stop when our mutual friend and my lawyer in several cases, Raghav Avasthi, and certain other people were literally manhandled, jostled, beaten up during a live India Today show with Rahul Kanwal.
Yeah.
They still did not break it up. And that then led to the Delhi riots. They still, even after the Delhi riots, they did not break it up. Okay. And then finally it was COVID that managed to get rid of it. Now, same pattern with the farmers' protests. They start uprooting telephone poles, you do nothing. They come, sit outside, blockade, cause huge amount of nuisance for everybody around, violate everybody else's rights. No action taken. They then ransacked the capital. You saw this on TV. They were beating up policemen. They were throwing policemen into ditches around into the Red Fort's moat. No action was taken. It was still not dispersed. And today, thanks to this government's complete utter incompetence, criminal incompetence in dealing with the situation, we are now looking at a case where three BJP workers plus their honest driver who was killed, tortured and killed, even though there is visual evidence that they tried to force a false statement that the Union Minister of State for Home Affairs tried to get them killed. That was what they were trying to put into his mouth. And to his credit, knowing he was dying, he refused to say that. And they are going to pay all these people 45 lakh rupees. There is something very, very wrong with this government. I'm not blaming the farmers in this. I've also stopped blaming the Shaheen Bagh people in it. At some point, the government and this prime minister in particular really has to answer. And, I don't really care for all these BJP trolls who are more worried about me being a beef eater or a fat, gay, ugly man criticizing the PM rather than holding the PM to account for the killing of their own people. At what point, why is it that people who are not in the BJP like me are so worried about BJP workers and their lives and their wives than the BJP's own prime minister is? There's something very sadistic and sick about this.
Suhel, you've been watching this from afar, and it's indeed a very tragic day. It's kind of gut wrenching to see those videos that are doing the rounds. And I was just watching Captain Amrinder Singh's interview before we went live, and he was saying that there has to be some solution that is reached sooner than later, because this protest has the possibility of inflaming passions in Punjab in a way that is going to push young people towards some sort of radicalization and follow the Pakistan sleeper cell plan. And he also mentioned that he has been, you know, he's in his tenure as CM, he has confiscated over 1,000 drones, which have been bringing in weapons from across the border. And he says those are the ones that I've caught. There must be others that have that have not been able to, we've not been able to detect. So you're looking at a really a bit of a tinderbox like situation.
So, taking off from where Abhijit left, three or four things have happened. Number one, let me give you the real news. Modi and Amit Shah aren't the strong men you thought they were. They're weak, they're limp, they're insipid when it comes to handling serious issues with swiftness and firmness. They've shown that time and time again. Both, as Abhijit mentioned, with internal security, more importantly, with their own people. भाई जो अपने घर को नहीं संभाल सकता वो भाग क्या संभालेगा घंटा संभालेगा That's number one. Number two, the BJP has this knack of scoring self goals where even a self goal is not necessary. And let me tell you why. Today, what has happened is, has put the BJP in the worst possible light in both quarters, in quarters of opposition and in their own, within their own family. Now tell me, why would a BJP worker work for a party which can't defend that particular person? It hasn't been able to defend them in Bengal. And now in UP, where there are so called strongmen all over from every branch of every goddamn tree. And then Yogi Adityanath declares a 45 lakh payment to people who've lost their lives and 10 lakhs to people who've been injured, thereby also an admission of guilt that yes, some criminality did take place. Number three, Abhijit's point about no videography. BJP takes a video of everything. If the prime minister is petting a peacock or a peahen, that gets videographed. If the prime minister is going to the toilet, that gets videographed. If Amit Shah is patting a cow, that gets videographed. And they don't have the wherewithal to videograph all of this. And today you don't need Doordarshan to be trailing you or ANI. I mean, you've got video, you've got phones which have video cameras on them. So this logic, oh, we forgot, is perverse and stupid and makes the party look even worse than it already is looking. Number four, this is a serious issue. If I were the prime minister, I would do four things. Number one, I would sack Ajay Mishra from the cabinet for only one reason. If the son has an FIR against him and the father is the Minister of State for Home, irony dies 1,000 deaths. Number two, as in law, as in the judiciary, if I'm related to a judge or if I've appeared for a particular client and I then become a judge, I recuse myself. There is no recusal from Ajay Mishra. On the contrary, there is arrogant aggression, which to my mind is also stupid. Number three, what he should do is then ask for a Supreme Court led or a Supreme Court driven inquiry to bring back the faith of the people. Please understand, people are now disgusted. The violence has taken, to my mind, an ugly turn, a turn where no one feels, safe. Number four, what Modi's done is he's handed this whole thing on a platter to the opposition. I mean, to detain Priyanka Gandhi, to detain all these people, you're giving them more heft than they deserve. I mean, even the farmer in Uttar Pradesh doesn't know who the hell Channi is or Bharadwaj is or whoever these Johnnies are. They don't know. They don't care. And the worst thing is that the prime minister has been ostrich-like and in denial about the farmers' issue and the seriousness. If Takat is a dakat and if Takat is a fraud, expose him. You've had almost a year. You haven't been able to do it. Then you supposedly control or, well, profess to be influential as far as the judiciary is concerned. The Supreme Court is also knocking you guys. Today, when the farmers, or today, when the farmers went to the Supreme Court asking for the right to protest, I mean, that in itself is fundamentally stupid because it is my right to move around in my country. And if someone is abrogating or taking away that right, I have every right to protest as well. So it's a complete hodgepodge. As Uttar Pradesh goes to vote or goes for elections, yes, for a lot of the wicked people, polarization may happen, but not this kind of polarization. Not a polarization where the workers who will hopefully garner votes for you at the hustings will feel demotivated or depressed. What is also to my mind, very dangerous is the manner in which the government, both at the center and the state, approach any criminal activity. For the most part, they will not talk about it. Abhijit talked about tweeting. They will just not talk about it. They will say, oh, as if nothing has happened. Or it is not worthy of their comment, which makes it even worse. I've always said, you may hate someone, you may like someone, but indifference is the most irksome. Today, the Prime Minister and the Home Minister are indifferent to what's happening in this country. And that, to my mind, is a very dangerous trend. Rajiv Tuli, my friend, who's on the program, should advise Bhagwat and all his colleagues that this is not the party that the RSS should be supporting. Because if the RSS is cadre driven, and if the cadres are allowed to bleed and die, or if the cadres are allowed to suffer, then what kind of a political movement are you building? And look, I don't care about the BJP or the Congress, which I've told you repeatedly on your program. I generally believe that if India is to be seen as fair and judicious, if we are to be seen as the epitome of fairness and judicial righteousness, then this is not the way the country can behave. And I have to say, somewhere the fault must lie with the Prime Minister and the Home Minister. There's been too much of bloody pussyfooting around, too much of pussyfooting around with, when it comes to anything to do with the Prime Minister, the Home Minister. And let me be honest with you. I'm a great believer that Modi is good for India. But let me tell you, there is only this much and no more that any Indian can stomach. Now, if I'm saying this, can you imagine what must be going through the families of those who've been killed? Whether they are BJP members, whether they are Congress people, whoever the hell they are, they must be feeling miserable. Ultimately, the Prime Minister is India's Prime Minister. He's not BJP's Prime Minister. Amit Shah is India's Home Minister. Yogi is Uttar Pradesh's Chief Minister. This kind of divisiveness, this kind of abrogation of responsibility, this kind of, turning a blind eye to blatant and brazen criminality must stop. And, we talked about news channels and all. And if these channels are spreading fake news, then take them to court. Then take them to task. What's the point of having a proxy war with Google or a proxy war with Facebook or a proxy war with some other Johnnies? So that's my little initial point.
One quick point, Advaita. Just quickly add, sorry, Rajiv ji. If you remember, I think one of my most memorable impressions of Suhel was when he appeared on what was then Times Now with Arnab. When this whole 2611 had happened, when the then Home Minister was going around changing his bandgalas and coming on TV.
Shivraj Patil, correct.
Shivraj Patil. Now, to me, that was as tone deaf as today the Prime Minister tweeting about his dear friend, the Japanese Prime Minister, and how he's going to have great talks with the Japanese Prime Minister when all this has been happening out here. Okay. Second part, very quickly, just to wrap up. Modi is very selective in what he tweets about. He does tweet about mundane, normal stuff. He tweets about Shabana Azmi's broken nose within 2 hours of her breaking her nose. He also tweeted, mind you, when all these so-called liberals got together for that cow lynching at Jantar Mantar, he gave a speech. He gave a whole speech about how the death of one man was so this thing and, should be condemned and all of that. But even Amit Shah never bothered about those hundreds of RSS workers who were hacked to death in Kerala till election time came.
No, I don't agree with that. Because
it is a fact. Where did you tell me where did this thing come?
I'll tell you, because I have been very actively involved with Kannur at the ground level and even from Delhi for multiple years. Shah was incredible. And he was incredible in reaching out, in standing with the workers, in doing what he needed to do. He was the party president at that point of time. And the kind of response that, for example, Congress was like nothing. On Kannur, on the ground, people were saying that, look at Shah, look at how he's standing with people, because the Congress turned a blind eye. The CPM, of course, were the aggressors. So I
And
don't
where
quite
was
agree.
Modi?
Huh?
And where was
Prime
Modi?
Minister Modi, Prime Minister Modi was the prime minister. This was a party thing. He did speak about it,
So why
but
is a cow lynching?
but Shah was
Iyer,
definitely very.
1 minute, 1 minute.
No, that's
Modi
not.
is the face. Modi is the face to fight elections, but he's not the face of the party when party workers are killed. What kind of logic is that? It's
No,
the
no,
same
no.
Modi is exhorting all the people, please
See,
get BJP people voted. Number one. Number two, what kind of party president is JP Nadda? JP Nadda is in office, but not in power. Amit Shah is in power, but he's not the party president officially. What kind of a joke is this?
I'm
You think anyone in the
I'm speaking
BJP cares for
specifically
Nadda?
of.
They don't give a toss about Nadda. You ask Rajiv Tuli, even
Anyway,
Rajiv Tuli will not speak to Nadda if he's very
so
busy.
we're digressing. We're digressing. Rajiv Tuliji, I want to really ask you this question. Yes, there is a lot of anger and frustration at the way this farmers' protest is just going on and on and on. They have done things like, take on mass protests during Republic Day, attack police, climb onto the Red Fort. I mean, they've blocked roads very recently in Gurgaon. Also, right a couple of weeks ago, they have been beating up BJP workers in Punjab, in Ghazipur, in the Tikri border. They have assaulted BJP workers. Now it's reached a stage where this particular incident is, of course, being investigated, but BJP workers have lost their life, protesters have lost their lives, and a journalist who was on the job in the line of duty has lost his life. The only thing that is somewhat responsible about this is that a resolution was reached. Now, you can be critical of that resolution, like Abhijit says, that murderers and victims were given the same amount of compensation. But what they did manage to do is diffuse the situation, and credit to the UP government for being able to do that and for doing that swiftly. But Rajivji, why is there not a more tough position taken on these protests? Why are they just permitted to carry on and on and on and spread and escalate, and now people have lost their lives?
Advaita ji, this is actually a very tricky situation. This is a tough time for any government to govern for the simple reason that this is BJP versus all as of now. So all means all. It includes Akalis, Congress, RJD, RLD, Sapa, Basapa, everybody and anybody, any party you name it is there. And and the left of it. So, Suhel ji will, second me on that comment. ये जो बीजेपी का पंजाब का शिरोमणि अकाली दल के साथ जो गठबंधन था, that was more of a social tie-up rather than a political.
Correct.
Right. So the moment it is gone, and till that point even, captain was there who is a true nationalist. Believe you me, अगर कैप्टन साहब पंजाब में पिछले 9.5 साल नहीं होते तो कोई और कांग्रेस का नेता पंजाब चला रहा होता तो आज पंजाब की स्थिति क्या होती पिछले 7-8 साल में to prove a point that the government at center ruling the country is fascist, is against minorities, against Sikhs, तो उसको प्रूव करने के लिए कुछ भी किया होता इन्होंने और उस सारी वाइडर कॉन्स्पिरेसी में ही आप इस किसान आंदोलन को देखिए देखिए अब बेसिक जो किसानों का आंदोलन था वो उन 3 लॉज के लिए था which has been put on hold by the Supreme Court. So there is virtually, I mean, nothing to protest about. There were apprehensions which have been, by the behavior of the government. उसका सबका they have taken care of it. Now आज ये जो लखीमपुर की घटना है आपको लखीमपुर का थोड़ा बैकग्राउंड दिस इज तराई एरिया सो तराई एरिया मीन्स लॉट ऑफ सिक्स हैव सेटल्ड देयर आफ्टर द पार्टीशन एंड द पंजाब फ्रंट। उसके बाद बहुत सारा सिख है, इसलिए जब आप सुनते हो उसको, जो वीडियोस भी आ रहे हैं, तो उसमें भी वो जनरली पंजाबी बोल रहे हैं, और जो माँ बहन की गालियां दे रहे हैं वो पंजाबी की गालियां हैं सारी की सारी जो दे रहे हैं। तो डिजाइन अभी भी वही है, डिजाइन वही है कि किसी तरह से ये जो कुल मिलाकर के सारा आंदोलन अभी तक चल रहा है, और जिसमें जो जितनी भी पब्लिक सिंपथी थी वो सिंपथी खत्म हो गई है, तो उस सब को किसी तरह से उसको रीइग्नाइट किया जाए, क्योंकि पंजाब 5 स्टेट्स का इलेक्शन है, उत्तराखंड एंड यूपी बीइंग वन ऑफ दी स्मॉल स्टेट, और दी पंजाब जहां पर बीजेपी का स्टेक बहुत कम है। सुहेल पंजाब से है, अमृतसर से है, मुझे नहीं पता लास्ट कब गए थे, बट मैं अगस्त के महीने में अमृतसर गया था। तो वहां पर जो हालत है, अभी जो बीजेपी संघ के वर्कर्स हैं, जो कार्यकर्ता है, जो नेता भी हैं, उनके घरों के बाहर तब से लेकर के आज तक मोर्चे लगे हुए हैं। वन इज दैट यू कन्फ्रंट देम, आप उनके साथ झगड़ा कीजिए, आप उनके साथ लड़ाई कीजिए। इधर वो लोग खड़े हैं जो किसान बनकर खड़े हैं, आप उनके सामने अपने मोर्चे लगाइए, उनसे झगड़ा कीजिए, एंड दैट विल इवेंचुअली ग्रो इनटू हिंदू सिख काइंड ऑफ प्रॉब्लम, एंड which will burn the Punjab, which we have already suffered more
I understand. I agree with
than
that. Yes. Hmm. I think Rajiv ji, we've lost his connection at this present time. Abhijit, I want to come back to you also in terms, and Suhail as well. You know, in terms of this reportage that is going on, that one notices that even in times of tragedy, you have a situation where one side will not acknowledge uh, the death of anybody who doesn't suit their narrative, and this is repeatedly the case. I mean, you brought up Kerala earlier, and you know I was actively involved in that for about 6 years now, much less in the last year or two. But I noticed this a lot at that time, that you know there was people who were just not interested in reporting deaths of Swayamsevaks or RSS workers or BJP workers, and it's a real challenge. And I agree with you. In 6 years, very little has changed in terms of that attitude, and that does point to a certain laxity on all our parts, really. Those, especially those in power. But okay, Rajiv ji is back. Rajiv ji, please continue. Sorry.
यस। तो आपको वो जो सब मोर्चे वहां पर लगे हुए हैं उन सब जगहों पर, तो वहां आपको उनके खिलाफ एक मोर्चा लगाना पड़ेगा, और जब वो दोनों आमने सामने आएंगे, तो ऑलरेडी पंजाब ने जो सफर किया, आप देखिए कोई भी मंच होगा, वो मुजफ्फरनगर की पंचायत होगी, वो कहीं करनाल में कहीं तीसरी जगह जाकर के आंदोलन हो रहा है किसानों का, वो सब होगा, जहां जहां भी सरकार सामने खड़ी हुई, या जहां पर भी सरकार ने कुछ रोकने का, इन सब मंचों पर भी आपको टिकैत के अलावा चढ़ूनी या बाकी सब जो फेसेस दिखते हैं, इवन कल का भी जो फोटो सबसे ज्यादा चल रहा है, उस पर भिंडरा वाले का जो है वो टी शर्ट के ऊपर वो फोटो लगी हुई है, वो फोटो प्रिंटेड है। तो अल्टीमेटली आप डिजाइन समझिए, आप डिजाइन ये है कि इसको कहीं ना कहीं हिंदू मुसलमान जो है, मतलब हिंदू मुस्लिम का तो एक बहुत सारे जो सोशल मीडिया वॉरियर्स जो है, जो संघ और भाजपा के बारे में शायद इतना ही जानते हैं जितना उनको सोशल मीडिया पे पता लगता है। एक हिंदू मुस्लिम का मुद्दा, दूसरा आइसोलेट करने का मुद्दा है कुल मिलाकर के दिस गवर्नमेंट शुड बी प्रोजेक्टेड एज एन फासिस्ट एंटी माइनॉरिटी गवर्नमेंट। तो जहां पर भी आप मंच देखेंगे वहां पर आपको ये सिख जितने भी है ये जरूर दिखाई देंगे, और ये सब वही है। कहीं ना कहीं इनका जो फंडिंग है, मेरी फैक्ट्री से लगभग 3 किलोमीटर या 4 किलोमीटर दूर है ये जो टीकरी बॉर्डर है, और मैं उस टीकरी बॉर्डर पे जब जाता हूँ तो वहां पर वो टेंट्स और वो सब तो बने हुए हैं, मगर ऑक्यूपेंसी शायद 5%, 7%, 10% होगी। मैं इधर भिवाड़ी वाला जो बॉर्डर है, उस भिवाड़ी के बॉर्डर पे गया, वहां पर भी ऑक्यूपेंसी शायद 5-7% की, 10% की होगी। ऐसे ही सिंगू बॉर्डर की तरफ आप जाएंगे तो वहां भी 15-20%। सो दे डोंट हैव द सपोर्ट, वन, two is they don't have the people's sympathy also now. कोई उनके साथ sympathize नहीं कर रहा है. The kind of purchases that government had made in MSP, so they are losing their credibility. Now it is you to decide whether आप इसको इस स्टेज पर ला करके यहाँ पर ला करके
Hmm.
आप इसको दोबारा से हिंदू सिख बनाना चाहते हो. आप पंजाब की जो सारी अभी तक की बनी हुई इतने सालों में जो इतनी मेहनत करके जो पंजाब में दोबारा से वो सब शांति बहाल हुई है उसको डिस्टर्ब करना चाहते हो. और उसके बाद सिर्फ पंजाब इफेक्ट नहीं होगा उसके कारण से. आपको ध्यान होगा जब ये खालिस्तानी मूवमेंट चल रहा था, पंजाब में टेररिज्म था, तो उसका इफेक्ट असम तक और केरल तक और चेन्नई तक आता था. तो आपको अपनी पूरा ये सब डिस्टर्ब करना है या कुछ लोगों को. ठीक है, कार्यकर्ता कार्यकर्ता आपको देखिए, जब आपको एक बड़ी लड़ाई जीतनी है, एक आपको जब एक वॉर जीतना है, तो कोई छोटी मोटी बैटल में आपको हारना भी पड़ सकता है. मगर डू यू एक्चुअली वांट टू पिच योर सिविलियंस अगेंस्ट ईच अदर? Do you want to fall into the trap laid by these, all the opposition taken together? Do you want them to get yourself trapped in their trap? कार्यकर्ता, बीजेपी का कार्यकर्ता मर रहा है, संघ के कार्यकर्ता को परेशानी है, वो सब बातें ठीक है. आज देखिए, अगर मतलब माने अगर संघ चाहेगा, आज संघ की भी जो पंजाब में कहीं किसी स्थान पर कोई एक मीटिंग रहती है, तो वहां पर भी अगर उसकी भी जानकारी बाहर जाती है, तो दे ट्राई टू ब्लॉक दैट मीटिंग, दे ट्राई टू उनको डराने की, धमकाने की. और अगर हम चाहें कि नहीं, हमें इनको कन्फ्रंट करना है, हमें इनके साथ झगड़ा करना है, हमें इनके साथ लड़ना है, तो तो क्या रुक जाएगा क्या? मगर ओवरऑल मेरा ये कहना है, आई मीन there can be a strategy, there cannot be a strategy. An individual can be, tweeting about Shabana Azmi's broken nose, but not about कार्यकर्तास. ये सब हमारे मन में, सबके मन में एक रोष हो सकता है, किसी के मन में भी हो सकता है. मगर आप इसके रेपरकशंस एक बार सोचिए कि आपने इन सिटीजन्स, ये जो सिटीजन्स हैं जो वहां पर बैठे हैं, जो लड़ रहे हैं, जो वहां पर बैठे हैं और ब्लॉकेज और ये सब कर रहे हैं, आपको आपको इनके साथ लड़ना है और उसके रेपरकशंस क्या होंगे. जहां तक अभिजीत ने वो कुल्लू वाली बात की, केरल के कार्यकर्ताओं वाली बात की, I myself went to Rajnath Singh ji, who happens to be probably Home Minister at that point in time. We went to him, me and 2-3 other people, संघ अधिकारीज. हम उनके पास गए, उनको जाकर के मेमोरेंडम दिया, उनसे बात की, and whatever was possible to get it done there. I mean, for good of the karyakartas, providing them the legal support. We have a system there in place already. But still,
Yes, I
whatever
know.
possible could have been done, that was done with the Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh in place. Yes, you cannot involve, you cannot, imagine to get PM involved in each and everything. There are certain other issues which he is taking care
नहीं
of.
नहीं नहीं नहीं
He's taking care of. But as to Amit Shah, as to Amit Bhai and Rajnath ji, I am a witness to it, what they have done for our karyakartas in Kerala. You have a
I know.
democratic process, and that democratic process, you have a state government where law and order is the state government subject. You want West Bengal government to be dismissed? It's not going to happen for whatever they do there. But if that, एक बार वो हो गया, तो रात के 12 घंटे से पहले, 24 घंटे से पहले पहले वो जो राष्ट्रपति शासन है वो खत्म हो जाएगा, वापस वही सरकार आ जाएगी, और उसके बाद फिर वही आपको, यू हैव टू ईट अ crow. So there are a lot of things which are there which need to be take care of. But for this, what have happened there, Tarai area, you need to study the demography, the kind of connectivity it has got with Nepal. How can you people infiltrate from there to Tarai? How can people from Tarai move out to Nepal? क्या आपके बॉर्डर्स कितने पोरस है, वो सब आपको मालूम है, सब हमें मालूम है. बट उसकी डेमोग्राफी आपको समझनी पड़ेगी, और उसके बाद उस पर्सपेक्टिव में कि आप पंजाब को वापस उसी सब में धकेलना. लार्जली पंजाब है, जितने फेसेस देखते हैं, जितने किसान देखते हैं, जितने आरतीय देखते हैं, जिन सब की बात होती है, दे आर ऑल पंजाब, दे आर ऑल फ्रॉम पंजाब. Do you want to push that Punjab back into where it started about 10 years back, and from where we have progressed to today? That is a call to be taken.
No,
Yeah,
no.
that is worth
No.
considering also. I know, I agree with him to a large extent. I feel it's very important that we don't fall into some of the diabolic and I hate to say this, but I think with UP coming up, this is the first of the violent episodes that we're going to see,
No, it's
and
not.
that's
No,
unfortunate, but
Bengal
that's
happened.
no.
unfortunate.
Bengal
This
happened
is this is
before.
just the
Exactly.
beginning. You've just
Bengal
encouraged people to
happened
move
It is.
before,
fast.
You
Advaita.
watch.
No, no, Bengal happened before. The fact that you were
Yeah, this is the
impotent
beginning. Yes.
in handling Bengal, let me finish. The fact that you were impotent in handling Bengal, the fact that you allowed Bengal to simmer, now tells everyone that, yeah, jo bhi karna hai, kar lo. They don't
Hmm.
have the capabilities. Number one. Number two, while I agree with Rajiv on his analysis of Punjab, let me tell you, I'm from Amritsar and I've been there about 2 months ago or 3 months ago. Let me tell you what is actually happening there. There has been dissension right through. Even after Bhindranwale died, please understand the Khalistan movement was then transferred overseas and it kept getting traction from, as we would say in Punjabi, Canada. Okay? So it didn't stop. There are people across the border who would like to fuel and fund all kinds of dissension, and the Khalistani dissension is the easiest to fund. This has been known to Modi, to Ajit Doval, the super James Bond of our country, with no time to, I won't say die, but no time to actually act. So here's the reality: Punjab has been on the boil for years. Amrinder Singh, with his sagacity, brought it to some level of control. But it's waiting to explode. And it will explode because the Congress, other than Amrinder, because Amrinder was also the nationalist, which brings me to yet another point. I'm sorry for the digression. See, you have to understand the Congress has visceral hatred for Modi as much as Modi has visceral hatred for the Gandhi family. Why? Because he's thrown them out of power. As simple as that. It's not that they, are jealous of Modi's attire or his sartorial elegance. No, he's made them redundant and irrelevant. They will clutch at any straw to get back. Who are the other people he's made irrelevant? A lot of the news channels or news people.
Yeah.
Why? Because he doesn't care.
Hmm.
Now, what are those guys going to do? Suppose, I'm spurned by a media channel or, whatever. I'm going to
Hmm.
go back and I'm going to, the media channel is going to spite. And the media channel will say, I have to get back at this guy for anything.
Hmm. But
No,
so if I can
the
just comment on the media point.
BJP does not have, and I've said this repeatedly, the BJP is great at sloganeering, but the worst at communication. They have no idea of how to communicate. The bad news, whenever something happens, boom, they're very happy about it. But the truth is, they don't know how to set the narrative. And today, the narrative is being set by everyone else other than the BJP, despite the fact that the BJP is in power. And remember,
Hmm.
whenever something like this happens, it not only gets local, but it also gets global traction, which brings brand India into greater disrepute than ever imagined. Now, जब जंगल में शेर जाता है, ये थोड़ी कि रोज शेर को खाना पड़ता है किसी को in order to prove he's the Raja. People are scared of him. Either you build fear or you build respect. Since you haven't been able to build respect, then build fear, but build some goddamn thing. You can't allow the state to be rudderless. And that's exactly what's happening. It's a free for all. And people, Advaita, you will agree with me, people will say, yeah, a person who can't take care of his own party workers and their lives, what the hell are we talking about? So, that's
Hmm.
the point. And for all those stupid people who say, oh, but there was decisive action, surgical strike, blah, 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 please understand, give due credit. That was the military. That was our armed forces. Yes, the prime minister had a role to play, but he
But
was
it's a sense
pretty
of
much.
leadership also, Suhel.
Of course. No, 1 minute. I'm today telling you that Modi may be a great leader, but is he a great inspirer? Is he a great motivator? Is he a great protector? You give me the answers to those. It's another matter that, I'm a leader. But then what the hell do you
Hmm.
do? Now, if you're that much of a leader and if that much of control you have, you allow Shaheen Bagh to continue the way it did, and it turned out to be a fake thing. You allowed the farmer protests to continue to this day. I mean, what will people say in the
Hmm.
sense, you will lose interest and you will lose faith. See, the stupid argument by the BJP is we keep winning elections. Of course, you'll win elections because across you have no one. So, of course, you'll win elections, but that doesn't mean that the people are completely driven through inspiration by you. And that's the reality you've got to come to terms with. And the last point, they never
Hmm.
want to listen to criticism. These guys think they know everything about
Yeah.
everything. Now, how do you work with someone who thinks who knows everything about everything? They'll never listen to you.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Okay. Advaita, I have to go.
Professors
So,
joined us as well. Yeah, professors
yeah,
joined us as well.
I have
Yeah,
to go.
please.
So I'll just make
Thank
a
you,
quick
Abhijit,
last
for joining
point.
us. Thank you so much.
I'll just make a quick last point
Sure,
before I
sure. Go
go
ahead.
to take on from where Suhel left off. The communications, they apparently have a communications manager or outreach or whatever in the PMO. In the last 7 years, the fellow hasn't been able to get ahead of one single narrative. And if you go by the Atish Tasir episode, even his basic comprehension of the English language seems so deficient. He shouldn't be in that communications manager post in the first place, right? But I just want to address what Tuli ji said. The lesson of Punjab that we get. Why did Punjab blow up? Okay, ultimately it was Indira Gandhi wanting to weaken the Akali Dal and propping up fellows like Bindran Wale and ignoring all his crimes when he went and attacked the Ravidasiyas and all of that. The Nirankari, sorry, not the Ravidasiyas. We just sat back and did nothing. You allowed crime after crime after crime by Bindran Wale's acolytes and the Akal Takht to go unpunished. The fellow who went and killed the Nirankaris, he was made head of the Akal Takht later on, after he got out of jail, and their jail sentences were commuted or reduced or whatnot. You, by not putting out the stick, by not showing them the long arm of the law and the majesty of the state, you allowed the Punjab insurgency. The Punjab insurgency was not created by Bindran Wale. Bindran Wale was the scapegoat. Indira Gandhi created the Punjab insurgency.
Yes, yes.
By allowing all these buggers to get away with what they've done today, if an insurgency breaks out in Punjab, it is the sole and only responsibility of Narendra Modi and Amit Shah. Nobody else. A stitch in time saves nine, tweeted Kapil Sibal. All I will tell you is these buggers don't understand carrot or stick. They don't understand deterrence. They don't understand how early action prevents much greater action later on. They are behaving like Nehru. A Chinese ko karne do, until finally 62 happens and they destroy. They're behaving exactly like Indira Gandhi did with Bindran Wale. Why? Because their political ambitions are bigger than national goals. They have conflated Modi winning elections to the national interest. And therefore, that has become the national interest. And enough is enough. This was the same government whose partner and ally at that time was supporting giving jobs to first-time stone pelters in Kashmir. How did that end up for you? Tell me. These guys don't know governance. They rely on a bunch of sad, pathetic, single exam wonders whose loyalty has always been to the Congress. Why is it that every open letter that comes has 100-odd ex-bureaucrats, but not one of the responses to those open letters has more than 5-10 bureaucrats in it? And that is it. It is this, this gawking admiration. अरे बड़े आईएएस के साहब हैं, वो साहब नहीं होगा, वो उल्लू का पट्टा होगा, पर उसने आईएएस पास कर दिया इसलिए बहुत बड़े, अरे विद्वान हैं आपने यूपीएससी पास कर दिया, अरे मालिक खम्मा गनी हुकुम राम राम सा, whatever nonsense. This admiration and adulation for the IAS has to go. This castration of your entire cabinet has to go. This fear of your own shadow that somebody competent in the cabinet can challenge you for your position later on has to go. This is not the BJP in power. This is an IAS government with outside support from the BJP. And this isn't even the BJP, it is the MJP. It's the Modi Janata Party. The BJP as we know it is finished. So I will just end there. Thank you. I have to go now.
Thank you for joining us. I've never seen Abhijit that angry, frankly. Thank you, Professor. Professor's here with us as well. Professor, as you know, you've been watching us also. Just wanted to get in your views on the present situation. It's been a very sad day after the deaths that took place. The farmers, protesters, as well as the BJP workers. Videos of that have done the rounds.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
So let's start with what Abhijit said, talking about Mrs. Gandhi allowing Bhindrawale to do what he did. Let's face this. Mrs. Gandhi was in power. And that was a deliberate strategy of the Congress at that time to basically promote Bhindrawale to make the Akalis look shabby. So it was the government in power propping up Bhindrawale. Remember, it is Rajiv Gandhi who used the word Sant to describe Bhindrawale. Because Mrs. Gandhi's attitude, whether it was in Punjab or in Jammu and Kashmir, was to use radical forces in such a manner so as to look the moderates look shabby. Even the boost that the Jamaat-e-Islami got in Jammu and Kashmir was basically after the national conference under Sheikh Abdullah had really gone after the Jamaatis, after the execution of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. So to that extent, it was then the ruling party which was supporting these particular elements. Here, for the first time in India's history, it is the opposition which is basically pushing these people for partisan purposes. Now, as Tuli sir pointed out, in Punjab, it is the captain who has stood firm against these particular forces. And had he not been there, the situation would have been far worse than it currently is. No doubt about it. So the question, and we know what is being done. As Tuli Sahab said, what is being done is to ensure a clash basically between communities. And he is right that the BJP and the Akali coalition is not, he doesn't call it a political coalition. It is a political coalition, but it is also a quasi-social coalition. A quasi-social coalition in which the BJP has got the wrong end of the deal, and the BJP has not done nothing to basically counter it. But that's another part. Now, what they're trying now, they level best to make it into a communal clash actually. Hindus versus Sikhs, Hindus versus Muslims, wherever it is possible to show, look, India is ungovernable. And at this point in time, sometimes the most difficult decision, in a sense, is to wait for the opportune time to do something. You may want to come down upon them like a ton of bricks. Sometimes that is necessary. For example, I say that Operation Blue Star should have taken place when the DIG Atwal was shot on the gates of the Golden Temple. That was the opportune time. That should have taken place. But Mrs. Gandhi kept on waiting because she was too invested in this particular process itself. Timing is important, no doubt about it. Now the question is whether you like it or not. There's sometimes it's not a perfect world. It's the world we live in. So you have to wait for the opportune time to do something about it. Now, let's talk about another point, the emotive point that Abhijit made.
Yeah.
That compensation compensates both the murderer and the murdered. That's the hyperbole. It is true that the BJP workers were murdered, but it's not the murderers who are being given compensation. It is the people who died on the spot, ostensibly by the car getting mowed, although nobody saw that. The story is they tried to flip the car, and in so flipping, they died. So so let's get this point right as well. This narrative also has to be right as well. They are compensating those people who died, not necessarily the murderers. To say it murderers basically queers the pictures. The thing is, I think after what has happened, in a sense, by getting Tikayat on the same platform as the police when the compensation was being announced,
you legitimize him, to a certain extent.
The question is, legitimization will occur later. I'm not too sure whether you can anybody legitimize him. what you have done is basically bring the protesters on the same plank. So you have announced an interim solution on which the so-called farmers also are on board, which gives you the authority to prevent others from
Yeah,
making a tamasha out of this particular show. Because
which
as
is what
police
I
have
was
told them,
saying.
this is a particularly sensitive area where a lot of mischief can be done. So by
Hmm.
preventing people from coming in, because you've told them, look, I have basically put in an interim solution. Let us find out what the facts were. So you prevent a lot of people from making a tamasha out of this, and then you let the law take its own course. Let's find out what happened. So my thing is, see, these things you cannot prevent because there are so many things being done at so many levels. As I said, timing is important. When do you crack down? You crack down now, it has consequences. So, in a sense, since we live in a political world, I would imagine the crackdown would probably take place after the Punjab elections. Very cynical, it may sound extremely cynical,
Hmm.
but given the world we live in, I think that is possibly what will happen. Okay, but
I
again,
mean, but Professor,
it's
but
important.
Professor, I have a question. Do you even
Yeah,
think that this will last? This will even last beyond the Punjab elections? This protest, because it
because it
has.
is.
No, no, Professor. Tell you why I'm asking this question, and Rajiv Tuli ji also, as well as Suhel. Because it's growing in a very inorganic way. Wherever there is an election or something like that, you will see protests start. So you will, for example, not see protests in other part of the country. You haven't seen it happening in UP really till you're about 6 months away from the election. Okay. On the other hand, you will have a gathering in Muzaffarnagar where the farmers are upset, but they are upset about the gunna rates and the fact that it's not coming in time and those kind of things. And that's their main issue. They're not, but those kind of protests will not get, of course, highlighted by the media. Only these by Tikait and gang, which are like which tend to have this pop up. They're like pop up protests. They come up in areas where there's a potential for something more to happen.
It is precisely as Tuliji pointed out. These protests are not gaining ground. It is because they are spluttering out that you have to indulge in provocative acts like this to keep it alive. So it is no longer a farmers' protest. The aim is to make it a communal one, specifically Hindu versus Sikh. That is why you have these tamashas from time to time. And that is, see, that is what makes it extremely difficult. Now, I will fault the government on certain things. One is communication strategy. I wish it had a far better communication team. You
Yeah,
can take this. Look, it's not just enough government coming, the government
You
ministers
speaking.
coming and explaining the government's point of view very articulately once and they go away thinking that their job is done. Given the fact there is an ecosystem against you, you have to build up counter ecosystem to counter it at all points in time. A, that is not occurring. B, intelligence. These things are to be nipped in the bud. I know from Jammu and Kashmir, every small problem would snowball into a stone pelting incident. Ultimately, the police would come in, use pellet
Corruption.
guns, kill
And say
people,
that
and
Suhel
it
is
would
done.
blow up. My problem out here is the following. You see, you have to have sufficient intelligence to nip it to the bud. You should
yeah,
know whenever a blockade is taking place and try your level best to ensure that this blockade does not take place. Look, how you do it, whether monetary instruments, penalizing people, causing financial loss, etc. That is something that you have to decide. But you have to ensure that these particular pinpricks, which are actually traps for what? Provocative action or legitimate action, which is turned into a provocative action by acts like this or incidents like this, which has a tendency to escalate to something larger. So there is an intelligence
correct.
failure or a failure to act calibratedly on this particular intelligence. So these are the two
Or, or,
faults.
the, or the opponent is also very determined. Okay,
Yes.
that is also something
So that
determined,
is
well
something
funded,
I think
going.
the government has to look into.
Yeah, so I think that is also a factor in when it comes to these protests. I do get your point about the communication strategy. The farmers in Muzaffarnagar, which is supposed to be a stronghold of SP and RLD and all these people supposedly. They had this huge rally. I tweeted the video today, and they were very clear. They said that they had they said some very interesting things which never make it to mainstream narrative. So much for accusations of Godi media, but I've never seen like farmers like that speak up where they're talking about their rights and yet at the same time are denouncing the farmers' protests and saying that, to use their words, not mine, that the dalals are upset, not the kisans. Now, why is that not part of the narrative and why is that not public knowledge? Rajiv Tuliji. And then Suhel, of course, because communications is something that is his
Yes.
forte.
Yeah, communication is Suhail's domain, I believe, but still, Professor Saab was talking about the ecosystem. I think this whole exercise which you are doing, Advaita, is probably the formation of the ecosystem, right? Two, this is point number one. Point number two, yes, the BJP or the Sangh Parivar,
Acha, he's gone again. Suhel,
Well,
if you could come in.
That's why I told you communication both at the RSS and the BJP is worrisome. One because of technology and the other because of intellect. So let me just
Oh, please.
finish very quickly. And I meant technology in Tuli's case, not intellect. So
Okay.
let me just very quickly, because I have to have dinner with my
Yeah,
child. Now, the
sure.
thing is as follows. You're absolutely right. Remember one thing about communication, especially political communication. Whoever sets the narrative or sets the agenda actually
Hmm.
sets the tonality. If you set the narrative or you set the agenda, then the agenda goes exactly as how you would like it. It's
Hmm.
almost it's almost to my mind like a game of fine chess. So
Hmm.
the reality here to my mind is that there is absolutely zero communication from anyone in the BJP. And I'll tell you why. It's not that they don't know how to communicate. It's their arrogance. It's their arrogance that is making them do what they do, and that's the problem. Seeing them still, that's the issue. So, to my mind, what I would do if I were the BJP is there is no way that they can win all these channels. There is no way that they can sort out the issues that they have with a lot of the news organizations. And today, sadly, even the ones who are supporting them have been labeled Gothi media. So they're pretty much dead and dusted. Now, can they set up multiple Godis? No, they only have one lap. So the reality is that what do they therefore do? My belief is that you allow for neutrality in communication to now step in. And neutrality is by actually reaching out not to everyone who's against you, but at least to one or two people. Look, the fact, Advaita, is, as Rajiv rightly said, they're up against everyone. But this is not something new. I mean, they're not
Hmm.
babes in the wood where they say, "Oh my God, the whole world is against me," because they're pretty ruthless themselves. So now, when the tables turn and when you have the whole world against you, you've got to have a strategy for that. And if you don't have a strategy, bad luck. So I don't think communication is something that they've addressed in a strategic manner. Everyone knows that, okay, they've got an army of trolls. No one cares. There's anonymity, and the trolls by and large are unintelligent, because if they were intelligent, they wouldn't be trolls. They'd be hosting shows like you do. So that's the reality of the BJP. Finally, and this is where I want the professor and Rajiv to jump in, is that how long will you continue for a narrative which finally does not only denigrate BJP, it also then denigrates brand India. So whatever the BJP is doing or not doing, the impact is also on brand India, and that is a bit tiresome, it's a bit depressing, and it's a bit unfair.
Advaita, just a
Yeah.
last comment
Thank
from
you so
me
much,
as
Suhail.
I left probably.
Yeah. No, no,
due to
I'm
the
just letting
technical
Sohail
glitch,
get
right?
swapped off. Yeah, Sohail, if you'd like to leave, that's fine. I know you've
Yeah,
got to stick
thanks.
to a schedule with your daughter. Enjoy yourself. Bye. Haji, Rajiv.
ओके, इकोसिस्टम की बात कर रहे थे, सुहेल ने भी बात की इकोसिस्टम की और प्रोफेसर साहब ने भी बीच में टच इको बेस को टच किया, इकोसिस्टम। यू नो, आई थिंक द बीजेपी और द संघ परिवार इस थोड़ा इकोसिस्टम बनाने की तरफ थोड़ा लेट आया है, थोड़ा लेट उन्होंने इसके बारे में सोचा, एंड दे हैव देयर प्रोबेबल देयर ओन रीजंस। Like, look, the government which was there, or the ecosystem which is established, is there for last 65 to 70 years as of only for last 7 years that there has been an effort to, for the first 5 years it was to establish, to get themselves in firmly on the saddle, and now they have started making or thinking about the ecosystem being made. I clearly remember about 2012, 13, and 14 prior to the government, BJP government getting in place. In the name of, there were only three or four BJP spokespersons who used to be on the debates, who used to be on the op-ed pages of the magazines, who there were much, what you call it as talented people who wouldn't got the jobs in academia or in media, and then if they get, they will be given all the dirty jobs to be done. If somebody rises, somebody like to name Prabhu Chawla, if he rises to the level of a chief editor, he will not be made the managing editor. So there are a lot of things there which were there, which were happening probably, which have, all those few of those barriers have been crossed in last. I will give only 3 years for this government to be in place. For the first 4 years, they were there to get themselves established in this seat, to making the people believe that the government had changed, and in the bureaucracy, the people, the जनता जिसने वोट दिया था उसको भी नहीं लग रहा था कि अभी तक ये लोग सरकार में सत्ता में आ गए। बार बार वो कहते, सब लोग एक बड़ी एक अच्छी सी से, मतलब एक बढ़िया सेइंग है जिसको वो कहते हैं कि राज किसी का भी रहे, सत्ता जो है वो उन्हीं लोगों की है जो पिछले 70 साल से। सो दैट हैव फाइनली, दैट वो जो सब किले बने हुए थे, those have finally started cracking. So now, once they have started cracking, I can give you example of enormous number of universities where there were no teaching staff, or the academias who will own their allegiance to the this vichardhara or the ideology which is governing the country as of today. Today I know, and I can vouch for sitting here, and probably Professor Dipankar Sengupta can second me on that if he has. So the cradle, like JNU, it is cracking, it is coming down. वहां जो अभी वहां पर जो टीचिंग स्टाफ का या एकेडेमिया का जो आइडियोलॉजिकल कॉन्फ़िगरेशन था, नाउ दैट हैज चेंज. So once that have changed, now the students and the people coming in, and now these students going outside, getting placed, getting jobs on different universities, campuses, colleges. So they will also, so ecosystem making or preparing an ecosystem takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. They have spent 70 years doing it. The people who are in the ecosystem now. So we are also there in last 6 7 years. We have tried to. आप अद्वैता, I am an example of it. I used to go to the media in 2012 and 13 also. They will not entertain us at all. I still remember the first, story that you did in Mail today about our that Path Sanchalan that happened in Central Park, North Place. So that was the first major coverage that we got of one of the incidents in one of the prime newspapers. उससे पहले 70,000 1 लाख लोगों की एक रैली होती थी, एक प्रोग्राम होता था, वेल डिसिप्लिन प्रोग्राम होता था, नो कवरेज एट ऑल. Now at least there is visibility. Now at least there is some visibility that is happening on the, and then the social media. Yes, the social media. You can call them the trolls, but ultimately they are getting you the traction. They are getting you, they are there to fight for you. They are the people who are putting these so-called, NDTV and all these kind of journalists, the branded journalists of them, to listen to and to bend their ways a bit. So this, we are late there. The BJP or the Sangh Parivar or the the so-called right wing, I call them Ramvadis. We must be late there, but the process of making an ecosystem is a very स्लो प्रोसेस. ये नहीं हो सकता कि भाई आपने शतरंज की तरह ये सब हटाए और नए मोड़े वहां पर फिट कर दिए. It takes time and it is taking its own sweet time and things are being done. नहीं तो क्या इतनी जो विजिबिलिटी अभी मिल रही है, इतनी विजिबिलिटी कभी नहीं मिली, पिछले 70 साल में नहीं मिली जितनी पिछले 7 और 5-6 साल जो प्रॉबेबली बीजेपी वाले रहे होंगे उस समय में मिली होगी. तो
Visibility की बात नहीं है. I think part of the thing that Suhel was trying to say about the media, for example, and Professor, you can come in on this as well. The media has been used, especially I'm talking about specifically the Lutyens media or the Delhi media, also called the national media, has
so
been a
where are
very
they? There is no Latvians media now. The Latvian cabal has been disbanded as of now today.
नहीं नहीं वो क्या
इसमें
हुआ
से
है.
बहुत सारे परपेचुअली अनएम्प्लॉयबल है. बहुतों को अपने टीवी चैनल, अपने यूट्यूब चैनल शुरू करने पड़े हैं. दोज हु वर फिक्सिंग हु विल बी द मिनिस्टर, जो मिनिस्टर फिक्स कर रहे थे वो बेचारे अपने चैनल चला रहे हैं यूट्यूब पे.
नहीं, पर मैं क्या कहना
So
चाह रही हूँ कि दैट
this Lupian media is too overrated now.
अच्छा राजीव जी, मुझे
Sorry.
खत्म कर देना, मेरा शो है.
I know.
नहीं, they were a very pampered lot. उनका बहुत entitled, बहुत pampered lot थे. And we know with the kind of things that were going on, and like Rajiv ji also pointed out. But I think part of communication skills is also finding a way to reach people who do not agree with you or who have an agenda against you, right? I would say it's not even a question of having disparate views. It's saying that this person has an agenda against me. However, I have to get my message out there. So,
Look,
Rajiv.
let me put it this way. The Prime Minister is very good at communicating to those who wants to communicate with. That is the broad masses. So what he says, the manner in which he says it, is obviously not for the Lutyens media. By the way, I think the Lutyens media still exists. It has amplification power, which is
I know
way beyond.
at a
You
global
know,
level. Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
global level, they are linked with the right things, and therefore their power
Yeah.
to amplify certain myths cannot be underestimated. So
I
when it
agree.
comes to communication, the Prime Minister is able to communicate with those people who he needs to communicate. You see, but unfortunately or fortunately, okay, they may vote you to power, but you also need to communicate to another set of people, the middle class, the upper middle class, etc. Because it's not good to have a particular vote bank where that which just belongs to one class. Even among the thinkers, you need to communicate. And if you look at our thinking population to a great extent, given the fact they've gone to basically universities which were manned by people, by design, by people of a particular persuasion, they have a way of thinking in a particular manner. However, what is remarkable is the following, that the onset of the ICT revolution, the internet has made information so available and communication so easy and cheap that by and large it is non-social scientists, it is scientists who basically, people of science, who have come forward to use the internet to basically, challenge established notions, and they've done it very well. For example, Professor Rajiv Malhotra is not a social scientist. Professor Subhash Tak is not a social scientist. Ranganathan is not a social scientist. The thing
And
is, because
Professor, and I am not a journalist, but here
and
I
you are
am.
not a journalist. Exactly. No, you're a very good example. You are not a journalist. But what you've done is basically use this particular media to come out, and you are getting amplification. The fault of the government or the fault of the persons or the group that is Indic, that is nationalist, has been their inability to orchestrate this. This needs to be orchestrated. It needs better coordination. It's, various people need to be nested in certain organizations so that they continue doing what they are doing, but they get greater amplification. More and more people are reached out, more and more people are schooled into a particular way of thinking. It's happening, but my problem is not happening fast enough.
Well, I mean,
Number two,
it happens, but here's the thing. Kamal Nath will come into power even for a year, and the
yeah,
first thing he do within his first week is to empty out every department that has supposedly with everybody who even has a long distance connection with the Sangh or with the BJP. Kamal Nath will come in and he'll do it in a week's time. The BJP
yeah,
government, on their part, have been in power for 7 years in multiple
yeah.
states. Rajiv ji, you can come in on this. They don't do that. So, that is also there.
Well, but let me tell you this, yeah. Till 2004, this kind of vindictiveness, Narasimha Rao's time was pretty cool in that respect. Vajpayee was pretty cool in that respect. This something started to change in the UPA too, you know. And even though the NDA government did not reply in kind, whenever the
Hmm.
Congress came back to power, they exhibited this particular churlishness.
Yeah.
Now I think the BJP, in a sense, needs to act in kind, not be churlish. Find out anybody who can deliver for you no matter what his inclinations are, provided he is loyal to the government that he serves. And as
Hmm.
for the others, basically tell them, okay, thank you very much. But it has to be done in an orchestrated fashion. Very often,
Right.
what I see is the following, that you turf out a set of people and you bring in carpetbaggers, and that is pathetic because
Hmm.
a person who appears to share your ideology, and he
Hmm.
basically comes in and starts to make a fool of himself in the
Hmm.
government in full view of 1.3 billion people. That is embarrassing. So
Yeah.
it's possible that the government is aware of this particular problem. So, in order not to make mistakes, it's possible the government is doing nothing in this particular regard.
I know. So
It's possible. But
we've had some interesting appointments, but Professor, I just want to say, as somebody who works in the creative field, and Rajiv ji knows this, in the last 6 months, I've lost two projects that I've created. Not that I was hired on, but that I have actually created from blank page to approval. I've lost those projects because of my thought process or whatever you may have you. And so it's one thing that you can do that with governments and things like that, but in independent fields, in fields that do not really need governmental support, and I would say my field is one of that, irrespective of the politics of the country, what is successful, what is not. I've had to face that, and a lot of other people I know have had to face that and continue to. So I think there is a huge element of intolerance that we exist and we navigate, irrespective of who is in power. And I just feel that yes, I do agree that the actual sympathy for the farmer protesters has gone down significantly amongst the general public. There is no doubt in my mind about that, and part of it has to do with the way that they are increasingly politicized. And I think when the UP elections come along, we will know exactly which farm leader's son got a ticket from which party or is closely associated with which party and is fighting the election. I think all those things will be revealed. I also think that you will see a situation where these protests will whittle away after the big elections. Because let's remember that these very
No, no,
parties
these will
that were,
remain till 24.
you think so? Okay. Well, and the very parties that were supporting these same laws are now against. I mean, that just goes to show how cynical politics is and can be in our country. And I just want to thank both of you for joining us today. This was, of course, a very heavy topic. It's exceedingly tragic that people have lost their lives. The journalists in the line of duty, the protesters, the BJP workers who were brutally beaten up and killed, and those videos are doing the rounds. It's a very, very sad day. No loss of life should be ignored, and it's
and
appalling.
today
It's
and
absolutely
today we
appalling
lost
that a section of the media is completely not covering those lives. And yes, yes,
another.
Yeah.
We also lost Shakti Sinha today.
Shakti,
I think
No.
Shakti Sinha.
that was,
Yeah.
I mean, as I tweeted, it's unfair. It's just not done.
Yeah. It's shocking actually because he didn't seem like he was unwell. He wasn't
No, he
ailing. There
was
was
unwell. He was
he
unwell
was
for quite some time. Yeah, he was.
was he keeping that private? Was
Yes, I mean, he had a lot of dietary restrictions, etc. I know of, you know,
huh?
uh, and I mean, look, if you look at him physically,
Yeah.
overweight, etc., etc. So he had a
Oh,
lot
that
of problems.
it wasn't something chronic that he was dealing with. He was of a certain age, and I mean
Yeah.
those kind of restrictions come at that age. But I just interacted with him very recently, just about I think
Uh,
in the month of June. I mean formal interaction. Of course, I was in touch with him after that also for the book show when he was launching his new book, and I remember telling him that you're my first guest, so I'm hoping that this book show will do well and be successful. A very warm person,
oh,
extremely helpful, extremely open, and it's indeed a huge loss. And I'm sure you've known him a lot longer than I've known him. I've known him for the last, I guess, 7 6 7 years. But had
then
always had
you know
wonderful
him
interaction.
far longer than I have.
Oh, you have, okay. And lovely, I mean, never. Speaking about ecosystems, never ever, step back from introducing you to someone or any of those things. So I
Absolutely.
really do pray.
Very generous with his connections, with his
Yeah,
time, patronage, etc. Oh, very, very generous.
yes. And I pray for his soul, and I pray for his family, who I'm sure are dealing with such a huge
Yeah.
loss. I mean, I do read his book. He would have wanted me to say that. Do read his book on Vajpayee. It's brilliant. It's
Oh,
insightful.
great.
He met Vajpayee as a 14-year-old boy, and that pretty much began the change in his trajectory going forward. And recently I used to laugh with him about how his beard has grown so long, and I used to say, "Is Modi ji inspiring you because Shakti ji, you're not cutting your beard or you're not trimming your beard?" So he will be missed. He will be missed, deeply missed.
Yeah.
May his soul find Sadgati. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And we'll be back when we have something else to talk about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Stay safe. Take care of your loved ones. Life is unpredictable. Thank you so much. And do like, share, subscribe. Thank you.
Yeah.